Montana Territory, 1872. The snow fell in harsh, biting sheets across the Big Sky country, where winter showed no mercy to the unprepared. Cole Irwin had long believed that the frontier was a place for solitary men like himself, men who understood that sentiment was a luxury and attachment a weakness. At 26, the cowhand had already seen enough death and disappointment to last several lifetimes. His mother taken by fever, his father by a Sioux arrow, and his younger brother by the war that had torn the nation apart. The lessons had been clear. Love was just another name for loss waiting to happen. Cole pulled his collar higher against the wind as he urged his tired horse through the deepening snow. Night was falling fast, and Willowcreek Ranch, where he'd worked these past 3 seasons, was still a good hour's ride away. The cattle were secured for the winter, and he was returning from delivering a message to a neighboring spread when the storm hit unexpectedly. The plains stretched endlessly around him, the familiar landmarks obscured by the growing darkness and swirling white. He'd been foolish to attempt the return journey, but stubbornness was a trait Cole possessed in abundance. He'd rather freeze than admit he'd misjudged the weather. A low moan carried on the wind, so faint he nearly mistook it for the howl of the storm. Cole reined in his horse, listening. There it was again, unmistakably human. He peered through the curtain of snow, his eyes narrowing against the bite of ice crystals, a dark shape huddled against a boulder not 30 yards from the trail. "Hello," he called, his voice swallowed by the storm. No response came, but as he guided his horse closer, the shape resolved itself into a woman. She was curled protectively around something, her body forming a shield against the merciless elements. "Ma'am," Cole dismounted, his boots sinking ankle-deep in snow. "Are you hurt?" When she looked up, her face was so pale it nearly matched the snowflakes clinging to her eyelashes. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old, with striking blue eyes and dark hair escaping a woolen bonnet. What caught Cole's attention, though, was the bundle she clutched to her chest, a small, wrapped form that emitted a weak cry. "My baby," she whispered, her voice cracked with cold. "Please. Help my baby." Cole saw she had removed her own coat and wrapped it around the infant, leaving herself in just a thin dress and shawl. Her lips were blue, her fingers red and raw where they clutched the child. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Cole demanded, instantly regretting his harsh tone when she flinched. "The stage, overturned 2 miles back," she managed through chattering teeth. "The driver went for help. Said to wait, but the baby was crying so much, I thought I could reach town." Cole didn't waste time on further questions. He shrugged out of his heavy buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Can you stand?" She nodded weakly, though when she tried to rise, her legs buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Cole gathered both mother and child in his arms and carried them to his horse. With some effort, he managed to get them both settled in the saddle before mounting behind them. "Willowcreek Ranch is closest," he said, wrapping one arm securely around her waist while taking the reins with the other. "We'll never make town in this weather. Hold on to that baby tight, ma'am." "Dahlia," she murmured, leaning back against his chest as if she no longer had the strength to sit upright. "Dahlia Lane." "Cole Irwin," he replied, urging his horse forward. "Don't you worry, Miss Lane. I'll get you and your little one somewhere warm." The snow grew heavier as they rode, and the woman, Dahlia, grew quieter, her body occasionally jerking with violent shivers. The baby had fallen silent, which worried Cole more than crying would have. He pushed his gelding harder than was wise in such conditions, but necessity outweighed caution. By the time the lights of Willowcreek Ranch's main house came into view, Dahlia was barely conscious, and Cole's own limbs were numb with cold. He bypassed the bunkhouse and headed straight for the main house, where the ranch owner's widow, Mrs. Alina Willowcreek, lived with her housekeeper. "Mrs. Willowcreek," Cole shouted as he carried Dahlia and her baby up the porch steps. "Mrs. Willowcreek, I need help." The door flew open, revealing the silver-haired ranch owner, her face lined with concern. "Good heavens, Cole, what?" "Found them in the snow," he explained, pushing past her into the warmth of the house. "The baby, I think they're half frozen." Alina Willowcreek was a woman of action. Within minutes, she had directed Cole to place Dahlia on the sofa near the blazing hearth, sent the housekeeper for warm blankets, and taken the baby herself. "The child is cold but breathing well," she pronounced after unwrapping the infant and checking its tiny limbs. "A little girl, not more than 3 months old, I'd guess." "She's been well protected." Cole knelt beside Dahlia, whose eyes fluttered open as warmth began to penetrate her frozen body. "Emma," she whispered, "is Emma all right?" "Your daughter's fine," Cole assured her, "Mrs. Willowcreek is tending to her." Relief flooded Dahlia's face, followed quickly by tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking, "if you hadn't come along." Cole shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Dahlia said, her blue eyes holding his with surprising intensity despite her weakness. "They wouldn't have. Most would have ridden past, especially in that storm." He had no answer for that. The truth was, a year ago, he might have been that man who rode past, convinced that others' troubles were not his concern. What had changed, he wasn't certain. "Rest now," he said gruffly, rising to his feet. "You're safe here." As he moved toward the fire to warm his frozen hands, Cole found himself unable to stop glancing back at the young woman. There was something about her, a quiet dignity despite her desperate circumstances, that tugged at something long dormant in his chest. "She'll need dry clothes and a hot meal when she wakes, Mrs. Willowcreek said, coming to stand beside him with the baby, now wrapped in a soft blanket and sleeping peacefully. "And we'll need milk for this little one. Cole, would you have Martha heat some of the cow's milk we have in the spring house?" "Of course," he replied, grateful for the task that would take him away from the confusing tumult of his thoughts. As he stepped into the kitchen, Cole chided himself for his reaction to the young woman. Sympathy was one thing any decent man would feel for a mother and child caught in a blizzard. But the tightness in his chest when she'd looked at him with those blue eyes spoke of something more dangerous. Attachment, in Cole's experience, was merely the precursor to grief, and he'd had more than his share of that already. 3 days later, the storm had passed, leaving behind pristine fields of snow stretching to the horizon. Cole had returned to his duties at the ranch, though his thoughts continually drifted to the main house, where Dahlia Lane and her daughter remained guests of Mrs. Willowcreek. He had learned through Mrs. Willowcreek's casual reports that Dahlia was a widow. Her husband, a Union soldier, had died of typhoid shortly before Emma's birth. With no family left in Missouri, she had been traveling to Idaho Territory, where her cousin had promised her work as a schoolteacher. "Poor thing," Mrs. Willowcreek had said. 22 years old and alone in the world with a baby to raise, but she has a good head on her shoulders. Been helping Martha with the mending, insisting on earning her keep while she waits for the stage company to arrange new passage. Cole had merely nodded, pretending more interest in his coffee than in news of Dahlia Lane, but when Mrs. Willowcreek mentioned that the stage wouldn't run again until the passes cleared, likely not for another 2 weeks, he found himself inexplicably relieved. On the 4th day, Cole was repairing a broken corral fence when a movement caught his eye. Dahlia was crossing the yard, wrapped in a borrowed coat, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She carried Emma, bundled against the cold, and seemed to be heading toward the barn. Before he could think better of it, Cole called out, "Miss Lane." She turned, shading her eyes against the bright winter sun. When she recognized him, a smile lit her face with surprising warmth. "Mr. Irwin," she replied, changing direction to approach him instead. "I was hoping to see you. I wanted to thank you properly for saving our lives." Up close, with color returned to her cheeks and her eyes bright with health, Dahlia Lane was even more striking than Cole had remembered. Her hair was a rich chestnut, framing a heart-shaped face with delicate features. "No need for thanks," he said, suddenly aware of his work-roughened hands and the sweat staining his shirt despite the cold. "Anyone would have done the same." "You said that before, but we both know it isn't true." Dahlia adjusted Emma in her arms, revealing the baby's face. Round blue eyes, so like her mother's, stared curiously at Cole. "I wanted you to meet Emma properly. She owes you her life as much as I do." Cole found himself smiling at the infant, who regarded him with solemn interest. "She looks like you." "Everyone says so, though I see her father in her sometimes." A shadow passed across Dahlia's face. "Thomas would have adored her." "I'm sorry for your loss," Cole said, the words feeling inadequate. "Thank you." "It's been almost a year now." Dahlia bounced Emma gently when she began to fuss. "The worst pain fades, though I miss him still. He was a good man." Cole nodded, unsure what to say next. In the awkward silence, Emma began to cry in earnest. "She's hungry," Dahlia explained. "I should get her back inside, but truly, Mr. Irwin, thank you, not just for the rescue but for bringing us here. Mrs. Willowcreek has been extraordinarily kind." "She's a good woman," Cole agreed. "Lost her husband 3 years back. I think she appreciates the company." Dahlia smiled again, that warm expression that seemed to cut through Cole's carefully constructed defenses. "Then perhaps our misfortune has brought a blessing to more than just ourselves. Good day, Mr. Irwin." As she walked away, Cole found himself watching her retreating figure for longer than was proper. There was something about her resilience that impressed him, the way she carried herself with dignity despite all she had endured. It was admirable, he told himself, nothing more. But that evening, instead of joining the other hands in the bunkhouse after supper, Cole found himself walking toward the main house with a small wooden horse he had carved during the quiet hours of the night. He told himself it was merely a gift for the child, a small kindness that cost him nothing but time. The lie was transparent even to himself, but he chose not to examine it too closely. Over the next week, Cole found increasingly frequent reasons to visit the main house. A report for Mrs. Willowcreek, a broken chair that needed mending, fresh venison from a successful hunt. Each time, he lingered longer, drawn into conversation with Dahlia, whose quick mind and gentle humor revealed themselves more with each encounter. He learned that she had taught in a small schoolhouse in Missouri before her marriage. That she played the piano and sang with a voice that made Mrs. Willowcreek declare it a balm for the soul. That despite her gentle appearance, she had opinions on everything from politics to literature which she expressed with passionate intelligence. "Do you never wish to remarry, Mrs. Willowcreek?" asked one evening as the three of them sat by the fire, Emma sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle nearby. Cole, who had been enjoying the simple pleasure of watching the firelight play across Dahlia's features, tensed at the question. Dahlia looked thoughtful. "I suppose I might someday, for Emma's sake as much as my own. A child needs a father," she smiled sadly. "But love like I had with Thomas doesn't come along twice in a lifetime." "Don't be so certain, Mrs. Willowcreek replied, her wise eyes flicking briefly toward Cole. "My Edward was my second husband, you know. I loved my first, of course, but what Edward and I shared was different. Deeper in its way because we both brought our whole selves to it, joy and pain alike." Cole shifted uncomfortably. The conversation had taken a turn too personal for his liking, stirring thoughts he preferred to keep buried. "I should check on the horses," he said abruptly, rising to his feet. "Storm's coming, they get restless." Dahlia looked up, surprise and something like disappointment crossing her face. "Must you go?" "I was hoping you might tell me more about Montana. If I'm to stay in this territory, I should learn about it." Cole paused, caught between the urge to flee these dangerous feelings and the desire to remain in her presence. "Stay, Cole," Mrs. Willowcreek urged, a knowing gleam in her eye. "The horses can wait a bit longer. Why don't you tell Dahlia about the spring roundup? She's never seen one." And so he found himself sitting again, describing cattle drives and the changing seasons on the Montana plains. He spoke more that evening than he had in months, drawn out by Dahlia's genuine interest and insightful questions. Later, as he walked back to the bunkhouse under a star-filled sky, Cole confronted an uncomfortable truth. He was falling for Dahlia Lane. Despite every hard-learned lesson about the pain of attachment, despite his conviction that the frontier was no place for tender feelings, he was drawn to her like a moth to flame. The realization should have sent him running. Instead, he found himself looking forward to the next day and the chance to see her smile again. The stage that would take Dahlia and Emma away from Willowcreek Ranch was scheduled to arrive in 3 days. Cole had grown increasingly quiet as the date approached, withdrawing into himself as he had before they arrived. "You're being a fool," Hank, one of the older hands, told him bluntly as they worked together repairing tack in the barn. "Anyone with eyes can see you're sweet on the widow." "Don't know what you're talking about," Cole muttered, focusing intently on the leather strap in his hands. "Sure you don't," Hank snorted. "That's why you've been walking around like a man headed for the gallows, since you heard the stage was running again." Cole said nothing, but Hank wasn't deterred. "Listen, son, I've lived twice your years and buried 2 wives. Know what I regret. Not the loving, never that, just the times I was too stubborn or scared to speak what was in my heart." The older man set down his work and fixed Cole with a stern gaze. "That woman looks at you the same way you look at her when you think nobody's watching. But she's leaving, and words unspoken might as well be words unsaid." "She's still grieving her husband," Cole protested weakly. "Maybe so. But grief and love aren't opposing forces. Sometimes they flow together like streams joining a river." Hank picked up his work again, just something to think on before that stage rolls in. Cole did think on it all through the day and into the night as he lay sleepless in his bunk. He thought of Dahlia's smile, of Emma's trusting eyes, of the way something long frozen inside him had begun to thaw in their presence. But he also thought of his mother's wasted face as fever took her, of his father's body brought back across a saddle, of the telegram announcing his brother's death on a battlefield far from home. Everyone he had ever loved had left him. Wasn't it better to end this before it truly began, before the inevitable loss cut even deeper? Dawn was breaking when Cole made his decision. He would ride out to the north pasture today, check on the herd that had been moved there before the snow. It would keep him away from the ranch until evening, away from the temptation to say words better left unspoken. By the time he returned, perhaps his resolve would be stronger. He was saddling his horse when Mrs. Willowcreek appeared in the barn doorway. "Cole," she said, her expression grave. "I need to speak with you." Something in her tone sent a chill through him. "What's happened?" "Riders came in the night, 3 men." She twisted her hands in her apron. "They were asking after a young woman and baby traveling to Idaho. Said they were family, but there was something not right about them. I didn't like the look in their eyes." Cole's hand tightened on the saddle. "Where are they now?" "Gone. I told them we'd had no travelers through since before the snow." "But Cole's," her eyes met his, worried. "They said they'd be back and they were armed." "Did Dahlia see them?" he asked sharply. Mrs. Willowcreek shook her head. "She was asleep. I haven't told her yet." "I wanted to speak to you first." Cole abandoned his saddling and strode toward the house, Mrs. Willowcreek hurrying to keep up with his long strides. Dahlia was in the kitchen, feeding Emma while chatting with Martha. The domestic scene, her head bent lovingly over her child, morning sunlight streaming through the window to gild her dark hair, struck Cole with unexpected force. The thought of anyone threatening this woman and her child filled him with cold fury. "Dahlia," he said without preamble, "do you know 3 men who might be looking for you?" She looked up, startled, then grew pale as his words registered. "What men? What did they look like?" Mrs. Willowcreek described them, 2 bearded, 1 clean-shaven, all roughly dressed, one with a distinctive scar running down his cheek. "Crawford," Dahlia whispered, clutching Emma tighter. "Thomas's brother." "Your brother-in-law is looking for you?" Cole asked, confused by her evident fear. Dahlia shook her head, her eyes wide with remembered terror. "He's not family, not really. Thomas disowned him years ago when he caught Crawford stealing from their mother. He's a violent man. When Thomas died," she swallowed hard, "Crawford came to the house, said everything of Thomas's belonged to him now. Including me." Rage flared in Cole's chest. "He threatened you." "Worse than threatened. If neighbors hadn't heard my screams." Dahlia closed her eyes briefly. "That's why I left Missouri. Crawford swore he'd find me, said a woman needed a man's protection, and since his brother was dead." "You're safe here," Cole said firmly. "I won't let him near you." "You don't understand," Dahlia replied, her voice shaking. "Crawford doesn't give up, and he won't be alone. The men with him, they're the kind who enjoy hurting others. I can't put all of you in danger. Emma and I should leave." "And go where?" Cole demanded. "They know you're in the territory." "If you take that stage, you'll be defenseless." "He's right," Mrs. Willowcreek interjected. "The ranch is defensible. We have men, weapons. Better to face this threat from a position of strength." Dahlia looked between them, clearly torn between fear for herself and fear for those who would stand with her. Finally, her gaze settled on Cole. "Why would you risk yourself for us? You hardly know me." The question hung in the air, demanding truth. Cole found he could no longer hide behind carefully constructed walls of indifference. "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know you're brave and kind. I know you'd give your life for your daughter without hesitation. I know the thought of anything happening to either of you is—" He stopped, searching for words. "Intolerable." Something shifted in Dahlia's expression, surprise giving way to a softer emotion that made Cole's heart race. "We'll stay," she decided, "but I want to help prepare. I can shoot and I won't cower while others defend us." Cole wanted to protest, to insist she remain safely hidden, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. This was the woman who had removed her own coat to warm her child in a blizzard, who had survived grief and threats in the harsh journey west. She was no fragile flower to be sheltered. "Then we prepare," he said simply. "Together." The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. The ranch hands were alerted, weapons cleaned and readied, windows were reinforced, sight lines cleared. Cole sent a rider to alert the nearest marshal, though help, if it came at all, would be days away. Through it all, Dahlia worked alongside everyone else, her quiet courage earning the respect of even the most hardened ranch hands. Only when caring for Emma did she reveal any vulnerability, in the tender way she held her daughter and the prayers Cole sometimes overheard her whispering over the sleeping child. At night, Cole took to sleeping on the floor of Mrs. Willowcreek's parlor, unwilling to be far from Dahlia and Emma should Crawford and his men return. It was during these quiet hours, with the house creaking around them and Emma occasionally stirring in her cradle, that they truly began to know each other. "Tell me about your husband," Cole said one night, his voice low in the darkness. Dahlia was silent for so long that he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her words soft with memory. "Thomas was kind, thoughtful, he loved books and music. He wasn't built for war, but he went because he believed in the cause." She sighed. "When he came home on leave before he fell ill, he was different, haunted. He would wake screaming in the night, but he was trying to find his way back to himself." "I'm sorry," Cole said, understanding all too well the way violence changed a man. "What about you?" Dahlia asked. "You've never spoken of your family." Cole stared up at the darkened ceiling. "Not much to tell, lost them all one way or another. Mother to fever when I was 15, father to a Sioux arrow 2 years later. My brother James to the war, same as your Thomas, only he wore Confederate gray." "I'm sorry," Dahlia echoed his earlier words. "It must have been hard losing everyone." "Taught me to rely on myself," Cole replied, the old defenses rising automatically. "Attachments are dangerous out here. People leave one way or another." "Is that why you've never married?" Dahlia's question was gentle, without judgment. Cole shifted uncomfortably on his makeshift bed. "Never met anyone who made me think it might be worth the risk." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken meaning. Finally, Dahlia said softly, "Sometimes the greatest risk is never risking at all. Never knowing what might have been." Before Cole could formulate a response, Emma began to fuss. Dahlia rose to tend to her, and the moment for honesty passed, but her words lingered in Cole's mind long after mother and child had fallen back asleep. He had spent years building walls to protect himself from loss, never considering that those same walls might be keeping out joy as well. As he watched Dahlia in the faint moonlight streaming through the window, her face peaceful in sleep as she curled protectively around her daughter, Cole confronted a truth he could no longer deny. He was in love with Dahlia Lane. Against every intention, despite every defense, he had fallen for this brave, gentle woman and her child. The realization terrified him. If Crawford and his men came, as seemed inevitable, Dahlia and Emma would be in danger. And if they survived that threat, the stage would still come to take them away. Either way, loss loomed on the horizon. Yet for the first time since he could remember, Cole found himself wanting to fight fate rather than accept it as inevitable. Perhaps some things were worth the pain of potential loss. Perhaps some connections were worth the risk. They came at dawn on the third day, not just Crawford and his 2 companions, but 5 riders in all, heavily armed and with the hard eyes of men accustomed to taking what they wanted. Cole spotted them from the hayloft where he had been keeping watch, riding openly up the road to the ranch house as if they had nothing to fear. 5 riders, he reported tersely when he reached the house, where Dahlia was helping Mrs. Willowcreek prepare breakfast, armed, coming straight in. Dahlia paled but reached for the rifle they had kept loaded and ready. "Emma." "Martha has her in the root cellar," Mrs. Willowcreek assured her. "The entrance is hidden." "They won't find them." Relief and resolve mingled in Dahlia's expression. "Good, then we can focus on sending these men away, permanently if necessary." Cole might have smiled at her fierceness if the situation weren't so grave. "Stay inside, Hank and the boys are positioned around the property. I'll talk to them first." "Be careful," Dahlia said, touching his arm briefly. "Crawford is unpredictable. And he won't have forgotten the humiliation of being driven off by my neighbors." Cole nodded, covering her hand with his own for a brief moment before stepping out onto the porch, rifle in hand but held casually, not yet raised. The riders stopped in the yard, spreading out in a loose semicircle. The leader was easy to identify, a tall man with a scar down his right cheek and cold eyes that assessed the ranch with calculating interest. "Morning," Cole called, keeping his tone neutral. "Something I can help you gentlemen with." Crawford's gaze fixed on him. "Looking for my sister-in-law and niece. Heard they might be in these parts. Young widow, dark hair, traveling with a baby girl." "No one fitting that description here," Cole replied evenly. "Just the ranch owner, Mrs. Willowcreek, her housekeeper, and the hands." Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's so, because we heard different in town. Heard a woman and baby were rescued from the snow couple weeks back. Brought right here." "You heard wrong," Cole said, though he knew the denial was pointless. Someone in town had talked, the stage company clerk perhaps, or one of the men who had helped recover the overturned coach. I don't think so, Crawford dismounted, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. See, Dahlia's family, got a responsibility to look after her and the little one since my brother passed. Be a shame if anything happened to them out here in the wild country. The threat in his words was unmistakable. Cole's finger twitched near his rifle's trigger. Like I said, no one here but Mrs. Willowcreek and her people. And we don't take kindly to armed men making threats on our land. Cole let his gaze drift briefly to where Hank and two other hands were now visible, rifles trained on the visitors. Might be best if you rode on. Crawford's face hardened. Now that's not very neighborly. We've come a long way. Least you could do is invite us in, let us warm up. Maybe have a look around since you're so sure our kin ain't here. Not going to happen, Cole said flatly. This is private property. I'm asking you nicely to leave. For a tense moment, Cole thought Crawford might draw. Then the man chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. All right, Cowboy will go for now. He mounted his horse again, but we'll be back, and next time we won't be asking so nicely. As they rode away, Cole remained on the porch, watching until they disappeared down the road. Only then did he allow the tension to leave his body. When he turned, Dahlia was standing in the doorway, her face pale but composed. They'll be back, she said quietly, probably after dark. Cole nodded grimly. We'll be ready. But as the day wore on, doubt gnawed at him. The hands were brave, but they were cowboys, not gunfighters. Crawford and his men were killers. It was written in their eyes, in the way they carried themselves. If it came to a fight, blood would be spilled on both sides. By late afternoon, Cole had made a decision. He found Dahlia in the parlor, mending one of Emma's blankets, her face serene despite the danger hanging over them. We need to leave, he said without preamble, now before dark. Dahlia looked up, startled. Leave, but you said the ranch was defensible. It is, but at what cost? Cole ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Crawford and his men won't hesitate to kill. I won't risk Mrs. Willowcreek, the hands, they shouldn't have to die for my decision to help you. Your decision, Dahlia set aside her mending, rising to face him. I never asked you to risk yourself or anyone else. I know, Cole sighed. That's not what I meant. I don't regret finding you in that snow, Dahlia, not for a single moment, but I've been thinking. There's a line shack about 15 miles north of here. Remote, well-stocked. Crawford and his men don't know about it. We could hide there until the marshal arrives. We, Dahlia asked, her eyes searching his. I won't send you alone, Cole said firmly. I'll go with you, keep you and Emma safe. Understanding dawned in Dahlia's expression. You're trying to draw them away from the ranch. It's the best way, Cole insisted. Crawford wants you, not a fight with a bunch of cowboys. If he knows you're gone, he'll follow, and in the wilderness the advantage shifts to us. I know this territory, they don't. Dahlia was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she asked, what does Mrs. Willowcreek say about this plan? She agrees, came the older woman's voice from the doorway. Mrs. Willowcreek entered, carrying Emma, who reached immediately for her mother. Though I'd rather you all stayed, I understand Cole's reasoning. And he's right, Crawford struck me as a man who enjoys inflicting pain. I won't risk my people if there's a safer way. Dahlia took Emma, holding her close. When would we leave? Within the hour, Cole replied. While there's still enough light to make good time, but late enough that will be hard to track. Dahlia looked down at her daughter, then back to Cole, her decision clear in her eyes. Then we'll go, but Cole, her voice softened. I won't have more deaths on my conscience. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. The concern in her eyes warmed something in Cole's chest, even as it reinforced his determination to keep her safe. I promise, he said, though they both knew some promises were beyond any man's power to keep. They rode out as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Dahlia holding Emma securely in a sling across her chest, her mare following Cole's, gelding along game trails rarely used by men. Behind them, Willowcreek Ranch would appear normally occupied, lights burning, men visible on patrol, giving no indication that its guests had fled. Cole set a careful pace, mindful of his passengers' comfort and the treacherous terrain. The line shack was remote for good reason. It stood in rough country where the cattle sometimes strayed during summer grazing. Few knew of its existence, and fewer still could find it without guidance. Darkness fell fully before they were halfway there. Cole considered pushing on. The moon was bright enough to see by, but decided against it when he noticed Dahlia's exhaustion. Despite her determined silence, he could see how she slumped in the saddle, how her arms trembled with the effort of holding Emma secure for hours. "We'll rest here," he announced, reining in beside a small copse of pines that would provide some shelter from the wind. "Just for a few hours. It's too dangerous to keep riding in the dark." Dahlia didn't protest, which told Cole more about her fatigue than any words could have. He helped her dismount, then took Emma while Dahlia stretched her cramped limbs. "I'm not usually so weak," she apologized, wincing as feeling returned to her legs. "I was raised on a farm. I should have more endurance." "Nothing weak about riding for hours in the cold with a baby," Cole replied, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. "You've shown more strength in the past weeks than most men I know show in a lifetime." Dahlia smiled wearily. "Sweet words, Mr. Irwin. One might almost think you were fond of me." The teasing light in her eyes, despite their dire circumstances, caught Cole off guard. Before he could think better of it, he answered honestly. "More than fond, Miss Lane." The admission hung between them, unexpected and unretracted. Dahlia's smile faded, replaced by an expression of wonder and uncertainty. "Cole, we should make camp," he said quickly, suddenly afraid of what might follow, rejection or worse, reciprocation that would only make their situation more complicated. "Can you hold Emma while I see to the horses?" Dahlia accepted her daughter back, her eyes still searching his face. Of course. Cole busied himself with the horses, grateful for the simple tasks that required no emotional navigation. By the time he had gathered wood and built a small, nearly smokeless fire, he had regained his composure. They ate a cold supper of jerky and hardtack, huddled close to the tiny flames. Emma, remarkably adaptable, slept peacefully in a nest of blankets between them. "She's a good baby," Cole observed, watching the child's peaceful breathing. "Strong like her mother." "She's all I have left," Dahlia said softly. "When Thomas died, I thought my world had ended. Then Emma was born, and I found I had to keep living, keep fighting for her." "You've done well by her," Cole said. "Risking everything to give her a chance at a better life." Dahlia was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. Then she looked up, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "About what you said earlier. About being more than fond." Cole tensed, but Dahlia continued before he could deflect the conversation. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "This connection between us, I didn't expect it. After Thomas, I thought that part of my life was over. I never imagined I could feel this way again, especially so soon." Dahlia. Cole began, uncertain what he wanted to say. "Let me finish," she said gently. "I know this isn't the time or place for such discussions. We're in danger, running for our lives, but if something happens tomorrow," she took a deep breath, "I wanted you to know that you've awakened something in me I thought was dead. And whatever comes, I'm grateful for that." The simple honesty of her words broke through Cole's last defenses. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "Nothing will happen tomorrow," he promised. "We'll reach the line shack, the marshal will find Crawford and his men, you and Emma will be safe." "And then?" Dahlia asked, her fingers tightening around his. Cole had been avoiding this question, even in his own mind. The stage would still come. Dahlia still had a position waiting in Idaho. Their brief connection, born of emergency and proximity, had no future beyond these dangerous days. But looking at her in the firelight, her courage and beauty equally evident, Cole found he could not lie, not to her and not to himself. "I don't know," he admitted. "I only know I don't want to say goodbye." Dahlia's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then we'll find another way." In that moment, with danger behind and uncertainty ahead, Cole allowed himself to believe it might be possible. That the walls he had built against attachment might be demolished without destroying him in the process. He leaned forward, slowly enough that Dahlia could have pulled away if she wished. Instead, she met him halfway, her lips soft and warm against his in a kiss that felt like a beginning rather than an ending. When they separated, Cole rested his forehead against hers, feeling more peace than he had known in years, despite the danger surrounding them. "We should rest," he said reluctantly. "We'll need to start moving again before dawn." Dahlia nodded, but neither moved away immediately. This fragile connection, this tentative hope, seemed too precious to relinquish just yet. Finally, practical necessity won out. They arranged their blankets around the fire, Emma secure between them, and settled in for a few hours of rest. Cole lay awake long after Dahlia's breathing had deepened into sleep, his rifle close at hand, his senses alert for any sound that didn't belong to the night. But his thoughts kept returning to the kiss they had shared and the future that had seemed impossible just days ago. For the first time in years, Cole Irwin allowed himself to hope. They reached the line shack by mid-morning of the next day, tired but unharmed. The simple one-room cabin was crude but solid, with a stone fireplace, provisions stored in bear-proof containers, and a narrow bunk built into one wall. "It's not much," Cole apologized as he lit a fire to drive away the chill, "but it's defensible. One door, two windows with shutters. Anyone approaching would be visible for 100 yards in any direction." Dahlia looked around the small space with approval. "It's perfect, truly." She bounced Emma gently as the baby began to fuss. "Is there water nearby?" "We'll need to boil some for Emma's milk." "There's a spring about 50 yards behind the cabin," Cole replied. "I'll fetch some, you should rest." "I've been sitting on a horse all morning," Dahlia protested with a smile. "What I'd like is to stretch my legs. Perhaps we could go together." Cole hesitated, torn between the desire to keep her safely inside and the recognition that Dahlia was no fragile flower to be sheltered at all costs. "All right," he conceded, "but stay close." The spring bubbled up from between rocks into a small, clear pool before running off down the slope in a narrow stream. While Cole filled the water skins, Dahlia sat on a sun-warmed boulder, nursing Emma and gazing out at the spectacular view of mountains and forests stretching to the horizon. "It's beautiful here," she said quietly. "So wild and untamed, but beautiful nonetheless." Cole straightened, following her gaze across the landscape he had come to love despite, or perhaps because of its harshness. "Montana grows on you," he admitted. "When I first came, I thought it the most desolate place I'd ever seen. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "I understand that feeling," Dahlia said. "Though I've only been here a short time, there's something about this land that speaks to me. The openness, perhaps, the possibility." Cole looked at her, struck anew by her ability to find hope in circumstances that would break many. "Is that why you were heading to Idaho, for possibility?" Dahlia adjusted Emma, who had fallen asleep at her breast. "Partly. After Crawford's threats, I knew Missouri wasn't safe anymore. But I also wanted Emma to grow up somewhere new, somewhere untainted by loss. Somewhere she could become whoever she wanted to be." "And is that still what you want?" Cole asked, the question that had been hovering between them since their conversation by the fire. Dahlia met his gaze steadily. "What I want has become more complicated in recent weeks. The teaching position in Idaho offered security, a fresh start, but now." "Now," Cole prompted when she hesitated, "now I find myself wondering if security is enough. If perhaps there might be something more important." She looked down at Emma, then back to Cole. "Something worth taking a different kind of risk for." Before Cole could respond, a distant crack echoed through the clear mountain air, unmistakably a rifle shot followed by another. "Inside," Cole ordered instantly, all tenderness gone from his voice. "Now." They hurried back to the cabin, Cole scanning the surrounding terrain for any sign of movement. Once inside, he secured the door and moved to the window, carefully peering out without exposing himself. "Do you see anything?" Dahlia asked, her voice calm despite the fear evident in her eyes as she settled Emma in a makeshift bed of blankets. "Not yet," Cole replied, his mind racing. Those shots were still some distance away. "They might not have found us yet, might be hunting game." But even as he said it, Cole knew better. Crawford and his men had somehow tracked them, despite all precautions. Perhaps they had been spotted leaving the ranch, or maybe one of Crawford's men was a skilled tracker who had followed their trail through the night. "What do we do?" Dahlia asked, checking that her pistol was loaded. Cole made a quick assessment. They had food, water, ammunition. The cabin was solid, the position defensible, but they were outnumbered, likely facing men with more experience in violence than he possessed. "We wait," he decided. "They don't know exactly where we are yet, or they wouldn't have fired. Might be trying to flush us out. If we stay quiet, they might pass by." Dahlia nodded, though they both recognized the slimness of this hope. Hours passed in tense silence. Emma, sensing the atmosphere, remained unusually quiet, fussing only when hungry. As afternoon stretched into evening, Cole began to think they might have been mistaken, that the shots had indeed been a hunter after deer or elk. Then, as twilight deepened into dusk, he spotted movement at the edge of the clearing, the unmistakable silhouette of a rider, followed by another and another. "They're here," he said quietly to Dahlia, who had been dozing with Emma in her arms. 5 of them approaching from the east. Dahlia was instantly alert, setting Emma down and moving to the second window. "What's the plan?" "They don't know we've seen them yet," Cole replied, watching as the men dismounted at the forest's edge, tethering their horses out of sight. "That gives us an advantage." "I count 5, Crawford and the same men from yesterday." 5 against 1, Dahlia noted grimly. "Those aren't good odds." 2, Cole corrected, glancing at the pistol in her hand. "And we have shelter supplies." "They'll have to come to us." They watched as the men spread out, moving with the caution of experienced predators. Crawford himself approached most directly, his confidence suggesting he believed the element of surprise was his. When they were within 100 yards, Cole made his decision. "We need to let them know we're prepared," he said. "Otherwise, they might rush the cabin, and at close quarters their numbers would overwhelm us." Taking careful aim through a gap in the shutters, Cole fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt at Crawford's feet. The man dove for cover with a curse while his companions scattered like startled quail. "That's close enough," Cole called out. "We're armed and prepared to defend ourselves. Best turn around and ride out while you still can." For a moment only silence answered him, then Crawford's voice carried across the clearing. "Now that ain't friendly, Cowboy. We just came to talk to my sister-in-law. Family business, you understand." "Your brother disowned you years ago," Dahlia called back, her voice steady despite the tension Cole could see in her body. "We have no business to discuss." Crawford's laugh held no humor. "That's where you're wrong, Dahlia. As Thomas's only living kin, everything he had comes to me, including his widow and child." "I am not property," Dahlia replied, her voice cold with anger. "And neither is my daughter. Thomas would be ashamed to call you brother." "Thomas ain't here to have opinions," Crawford shot back. "But I am, and I aim to collect what's mine. Now you can come out peaceful-like, or we can burn that cabin down around you. Your choice." Cole and Dahlia exchanged grim looks. The threat was not idle. A well-placed fire arrow could turn their shelter into a death trap within minutes. "We need to separate them," Cole said quietly. "Draw them in different directions if I can get behind them." "No," Dahlia gripped his arm. "That's too dangerous. They'd shoot you the moment you stepped outside." "We can't just wait for them to set the cabin on fire," Cole argued. "We need to act while we still have options." Before they could decide, a new sound reached them, hoofbeats, approaching rapidly from the west. Multiple riders moving fast. Crawford and his men heard it too. Cole saw them turn, hands going to weapons as they faced this new threat. "What the hell?" one of Crawford's companions exclaimed as riders burst into the clearing. At least a dozen men, rifles raised, led by a figure Cole recognized with a surge of relief. Hank, following close behind him, were the rest of Willowcreek's hands, and at the center of the group, a man wearing a marshal's badge that caught the last rays of sunset. "Drop your weapons," the marshal commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You're surrounded." For one tense moment, Cole thought Crawford might choose to fight. Then, with a vicious curse, the man let his pistol fall. "This ain't over," he snarled, looking toward the cabin where Cole stood watching from the window. "Oh, I think it is," the marshal replied, dismounting. "Crawford Lane, you're under arrest for the murder of Samuel Jenkins in Missouri, attempted kidnapping, and about a dozen other charges I've got listed in my saddlebag." As Crawford and his men were disarmed and bound, Cole opened the cabin door, keeping Dahlia behind him until he was certain the danger had passed. Hank approached, a broad grin splitting his weathered face. "Thought you might need some help, boy. When these gentlemen showed up asking questions in town, Mrs. Willowcreek sent word to the marshal." "Good thing she did, too." "Good thing indeed," Cole agreed, clasping the older man's hand in gratitude. "How did you find us?" "Weren't hard. I helped build this line shack, remember." "Figured it's where you'd head." Hank's eyes moved past Cole to Dahlia, who had emerged with Emma in her arms. "Ma'am, glad to see you and the little one safe." "Thanks to all of you," Dahlia replied, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. "I don't know how to repay such kindness." "No need for that," Hank assured her, "just doing what's right." The marshal approached, his stern face softening slightly as he took in Dahlia and Emma. "Mrs. Lane, I'm Marshal Tanner. Been tracking Crawford and his gang for months. They've left a trail of misery from Missouri to here. You're not the first widow he's tried to force into marriage, but you'll be the last. He'll hang for what he's done." Dahlia nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. "Thank you, Marshal. Is it truly over, then?" "It is," Tanner confirmed. "You're free to continue to Idaho as you planned." or wherever else you might choose to go. At these words, Dahlia's eyes met Cole's, a question in their depths that made his heart race with sudden hope. We should get back to the ranch, Hank suggested, either oblivious to the moment passing between them or tactfully giving them space. Unless you'd rather stay here tonight and travel in the morning. Cole looked to Dahlia, leaving the decision to her. What would you prefer? I think, she said slowly, her gaze never leaving his, that I would like to go home. If that's possible. The word home echoed in Cole's mind, carrying implications that made his carefully constructed defenses crumble completely. It's possible, he replied softly. Very possible indeed. Willowcreek Ranch, 1873. Summer sunlight streamed through the open windows of the small cabin Cole had built with his own hands on the edge of Willowcreek property. Inside, Dahlia hummed as she kneaded bread dough, occasionally glancing out to where Cole sat on the porch, whittling a small wooden horse while Emma, now nearly a year old, played at his feet. The sight never failed to fill her with contentment, this family they had built from the ashes of loss and fear. After Crawford's arrest, everything had changed. The stage to Idaho had come and gone without Dahlia and Emma on board. Instead, they had remained at Willowcreek, where Mrs. Willowcreek had been delighted to discover that Dahlia had experience with bookkeeping as well as teaching. This ranch needs a school, the older woman had declared. There are children scattered across 3 counties with no proper education, and I need someone with a head for figures to help me run this place. The position comes with a house, of course. That old foreman's cabin could be fixed up nicely. Cole had volunteered immediately to do the repairs, spending every spare moment transforming the abandoned cabin into a snug home. By the time winter released its grip on the Montana landscape, the cabin was ready, and so was Cole. He had proposed on a spring morning much like this one, awkward and earnest, Emma balanced on his hip as if she had always belonged there. I know I'm not much, he had said, his usually confident voice hesitant. Just a cowhand with some hard years behind him, but I love you, Dahlia, you and Emma both. And if you do me the honor of becoming my wife, I swear I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you. Dahlia had laughed through her tears, taking his face in her hands. Worthy, Cole Irwin, you saved our lives. You've shown me what true strength is, not walls built to keep others out, but the courage to let them in despite the risk. Yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times yes. They had been married in May, a simple ceremony in Mrs. Willowcreek's parlor, with Emma toddling between them and the ranch hands standing as witnesses. Cole had formally adopted Emma, who had taken to calling him Pa with a natural ease that brought tears to his eyes the first time he heard it. Now, as Dahlia shaped the dough into loaves and set them to rise, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate night in the blizzard to this peaceful summer day, they had traversed a landscape more challenging than the physical one Cole had guided her through. She placed the bread in the warming oven and stepped out onto the porch, where Cole looked up with a smile that still made her heart skip. Emma immediately reached for her, babbling happily. Almost finished, Cole said, holding up the carved horse. Thought she might like to have a whole herd eventually. At the rate you're making them, she'll have enough for a cavalry by Christmas, Dahlia teased, settling beside him on the porch step. Cole slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. She deserves all the toys a father can make her. She deserves a father who loves her, Dahlia corrected gently, which she has in abundance. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains. On the main ranch, hands were bringing in cattle for the night, their distant calls carrying on the clear air. Do you ever think about that night, Cole asked suddenly, when I found you in the snow? Dahlia leaned her head against his shoulder. Often, how could I not? It was the beginning of everything. I almost rode past, Cole admitted, his voice low. I heard something, but the storm was bad, and I told myself it was just the wind, if I hadn't stopped. But you did, Dahlia said firmly. That's what matters. When it came to the moment of choice, you chose compassion over caution. Just as you did when you defended us against Crawford, just as you do every day with Emma and me. Cole looked down at her, his eyes reflecting the same wonder she had seen in them the day he proposed. I spent so many years believing that caring for others only led to pain, that the frontier was no place for love. And now, Dahlia prompted, though she knew the answer in the way he held her, in the home he had built for them, in the future they planned together. Now I know better, Cole said simply. The frontier is exactly where love is needed most. It's what transforms wilderness into home. As if in agreement, Emma patted Cole's cheek with a chubby hand, her innocent trust the most powerful testimony to how far they had come. Dahlia kissed him then, a promise and a thanksgiving in one. For the man who had found a woman trying to warm her baby with her own coat and taken them inside. For the heart that had opened despite every reason to remain closed. For the love that had tamed the wilderness both around and within them. Together, they watched the sun set on another day of the life they had built, not in spite of the hardships they had faced, but because of them. And in the gathering twilight, with the child they both cherished between them, they found the peace that comes only to those who have risked everything for love, and discovered it was worth every moment of the journey.